Too. And joining me today is our Misty from our technical team. Misty, thanks for joining us today. How are you?
Doing really good, Joe. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's nice to have you join me for our webinar this week, or this month, I should say. Our topic that Misty and I were kind of discussing is something that kind of goes along with a little bit of the Q&A that we'd like to do at the end if anyone has any questions. But it's geared towards common things that we see as technicians and working with our clients, uh, geared towards cybersecurity primarily, but just security, some additional security things that we wanted to loop in regarding metadata and e-signatures and things like that, uh, that will help us and to help you in keeping you safe and secure in working with, just doing our work that we do every day. Misty, I didn't have a chance to see this little hack report that I put together here, but a lot of people ask us, why do hackers hack, and what do they do? So I thought I'd put together a really, really busy infographic for you that you could stare at for a couple minutes. You'll see that a couple things will jump out at you. There's a lot of red over in different areas. You'll see that hackers don't really care. They kind of look across the board in different areas, use all kinds of different things to get into private areas of your network and information that may give them an edge or some type of financial, you know, make some money somewhere. And we see this quite a bit across our client base, whether it comes through email, phone calls, text messages, or gosh, just being on the internet, right, Misty? We see that all the time.
We see it a lot. People giving away their information sometimes, and then sometimes the hackers being a little more clever to try a little harder to get it.
Yeah. So that kind of came across what we want to focus on for our webinar for you this month, and four key things. What are the basics that we use in helping to protect our clients that would be very, really good for you to set as foundation? And then second, going a little bit further, obviously the basics are good, but let's go a little bit further that provide a lot of bang for the buck in protecting your firm assets. And let's be honest, a lot of these things spill over into our personal use of electronics and computers as well. Misty and we'll talk about that too. Metadata, we're going to mention that a little bit, and then we're going to round out our discussion kind of talking about e-signatures and a few other things. So first off, Misty, a while back, we had kind of standardized on some cybersecurity basics. Do you remember what was our thinking on that? Remember, we had coming up with an antivirus, some URL filtering, and then a remote management tool for updates. Do you remember our thinking on why we decided to standardize on that?
Well, I mean, mostly to protect our customers. That's the biggest reason. But we wanted to make sure that we had kind of a baseline level of security for each one of our clients, and that we understood those products really well.
Yeah, that baseline was really key because we found that as we talked with different clients, as we worked with them, onboarding new clients and whatnot, and even for themselves personally, there were all kinds of different antivirus programs. Whether it was working or not, nobody knew. If it was reporting any type of issues or threats, who was being alerted to that, or was it even alerting things? And then the URL filtering, or for those less techy, web filtering. What would that do for our clients beyond just the normal antivirus, which I think everyone's familiar with? Misty, what were we seeing in that regard?
Yeah, so it'd be sometimes clients would be out on the internet Googling different things for their job, and they'd get to some URLs and unknowingly click it and be taken to a malicious site, and their computer would be infected at that point. The URL filtering added another layer beyond the antivirus. The antivirus was, once the threat was in the computer, it took care of it. But the URL filtering was stopping those malicious sites before it got to the client's computer, before it was infected. So it would send that request out to the internet, to a server, and say, hey, is this URL safe? If it wasn't, it wouldn't present that site back to the client. So they would never hit that URL if it was infected or had malicious stuff on the website.
Nice. And I like how you mentioned it's going from being the reactive to the proactive, trying to protect us from ourselves, because sometimes we just didn't know the link we were going to or the website was compromised somehow. Now, the remote management tool that we use, primarily when you think about controlling the updates that are put onto computers, why did we standardize in having that type of insight into the desktop computers? Because we had done that for servers for years, but why the desktops?
Oh man, RMM tools just give you so many more features than we used to get, let's say, 10 to 15 years ago in IT. With the RMM tools, we get, alerts on if there's a bad hard drive. We get alerts, and this is on desktops, we get alerts if the hard drive's filling up. We can also do something that comes in really handy is software audit and change logs on the system. So let's, for example, I had a client yesterday that they said they had go to my PC a long time ago. They haven't used it in years and they wanted to uninstall it from any computer that it was on. Now, if this client had 100 computers in the old days, finding where that software was installed would have taken a lot of time. But with the
Mhm.
RMM tools, it took about 15 seconds for me to click on audit software, type go to my PC, and click the link to see that it was only installed on 4 computers. So I mean, the overview, the asset management, the proactive alerts, the alerting us when systems are down, automating, like managing and automating patches, pushing out software scripts. It just gives us, the proactive alerts we need, the insight into what's going on, to those computers, and the tools to push out mass changes to the computers.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Now, for our individuals with the personal computers at home, this is typically something that you won't necessarily have on your home computer. But for our business computers, you can see why that helps us to help our clients in being able to proactively stay off any type of issues that are happening that we haven't been alerted to yet, maybe on the screen of the computer, to a point where we would be notified. But this will preemptively be able to allow us to see what's going on. Another big benefit that Misty talked about was updates. Um, how do you know if updates are being installed in a computer? Because a lot of times these cybersecurity threats we read about in the newspaper and the TV and the media, they'll say, oh, well, there's this big threat going around, but Microsoft released an update to this 3 months ago. So if you have that installed, you're okay. Well, do we have it installed? These tools allow us to know if they were installed, if a computer's having trouble with updates and things like that, that really help add another layer of protection to a computer when we're working on them and being able to protect them. So, as we've talked about before in previous webinars, making sure your computer has the latest updates for Microsoft Windows, your browsers, and other software, very, very important. So that's where you can kind of see the standard level and what we've seen and what we've implemented for our clients. That sets the foundation for us to go a little bit further when it comes to protecting our computers and our data. Now, I thought this was interesting, a little, just a segue in before we started talking about the individual things that we found that are really, really helpful in protecting computers and staving off problems, is to think about what you're actually protecting. So you could think about, we think about our computers in the office, but what do those computers contain? Well, they can contain documents. Some of them can be privileged information. If you're a healthcare provider or a doctor's office, insurance agent, you could possibly have PHI documents that would be protected. And, if there was a breach in those things have to be reported to the government and to the clients. That could be a big issue. What are the value of particular assets you have? Are there financial things you have to be worried about? Credit cards, invoices, banking information. And then, the other part of it is, what would this do to the reputation of your company as a whole if this were to happen? What would your clients think? What would it do to future business and those things? So thinking of things as part and parcel of the risk management on that type of loss or harm that might happen to your business. And then that is going to help you to prioritize what you need to do to help protect yourself. So give Misty a little segue into what we're going to talk about next. I like to use the word here, complexity of a modern small business, modern small, medium size. These are the things. Now, we already talked about antivirus. Misty, are there things, there's a lot of different antivirus programs out there. Do I have to pay a lot of money for a good antivirus program? I guess that may be a good starting point.
No, you don't have to. I mean, I guess a lot is defined by the person paying the money. I would say no. There's some pretty good antivirus programs out there that aren't that much money at all. Antivirus is kind of changing though, and if you filled out a cybersecurity form recently to renew your insurance, they're asking about EDR and all sorts of other things. And as you move up into those more complex tools, it does get pricier, but just a basic antivirus program is not that much.
We don't have to break the bank on providing some type of antivirus to keep us safe in the reactive part of things. Now, we talked about web filtering briefly as setting a kind of a standard as part of the antivirus, web filtering, and computer updates. With web filtering, what types of things would you look for in a web filtering product? And would this be something that we would say, hey, you could use the web filter that's built into your browser, or are we talking something else?
No, web filtering, I'm usually, as we talked about earlier, I'm looking for a third-party service, usually hosted in the cloud, that would filter those results before they got to the end user device. For some bigger companies, they'll use appliances that are on premise that filters that traffic as it comes in. But for most modern small businesses, the web filter would be something hosted in the cloud that would filter those requests before they ever hit the end user device.
And I know the one that we use frequently with a lot of our smaller companies is OpenDNS, which is a Cisco product. For those of you that are thinking about how to protect things on the personal side, you can also use OpenDNS. They provide a kind of a standard free basic filtering that will help block out, a lot of your porn sites and malicious websites that are known sites. I think they call it like their family blocking or something that's free by OpenDNS you could use. We also talked about computer updates and maintaining that and how that can protect you. But let's go beyond physical computer security. So obviously we have, we got our servers and we have our desktops that are in an office and they're secure. That's right. What about your tablet? What about your mobile phone? What about your notebook computer that you take on vacation or you take on a business trip somewhere? Misty, what type of things can happen with a mobile computer, a notebook computer on a business trip that we would want to be worried about that you could think
So
of?
a lot of laptops don't by default come encrypted. Some manufacturers do this by default, but basically your standard laptop out of the box is not encrypted. And what that means is if you take this laptop and say you've been on a browser and you've saved a lot of your passwords in the browser, sure, you have a password to protect the computer. But if you lose this laptop, let's say in the airport, and somebody picks it up, all they have to do is use a tool to reset your password. And then they're in your browser and they have all those passwords you've saved in your browser if your laptop's not encrypted. Now, if you encrypt your laptop, then when they go to take the hard drive out, they can't read anything on it. So it's really important to make sure your devices, whether it's your iPads, your mobile devices, or your Droid tablets or whatever you have, are encrypted. Just one other thing on physical computer security, even the computers in your office, if you look around, we kind of harass each other at Terrapin if somebody leaves their computer unlocked to try to get them to lock their computers. But physical computer security, also think about people walking away from their computer and not locking their screen. There's policies that should be set up locally to lock computers after a certain amount of inactivity. So I like to think of that in the physical computer security also, in addition to encrypting those mobile devices.
Good reminders. Now, are any of these types of things, break the bank type of things where you have to spend thousands of dollars having to implement, a policy to, force computers to have complex passwords or shut the screen off or encrypt the hard
No,
drives?
no, a lot of this is super easy to implement the policies, to do all those things, to encrypt the hard drives. Doesn't take very long on each computer. So it's really a cheap, good way to protect those devices.
Good. But now, what about passwords? So we've talked about this in the past, and I know there's always varying degrees of what people consider a safe password, a secure password. What have you found in working with our clients to be problem areas, and what solutions would you suggest to address some of those problems?
I heard cut out there for a little bit. I just heard, what about passwords, then nothing, and then address those problems.
Oh, well, that's good. That was my bleeping software there. It was bleeping that out. So with the passwords, we know about having complex passwords and things like that, but they can be hard to remember. Well, what have you noticed, when it comes to passwords, what problems have you seen with regards to passwords, and what recommendations could you make in helping to resolve some of the issues that come with using passwords?
I mean, people use their kids' names, their dogs' names, just not using complex passwords. I've seen that a lot, or refusing to have a password policy set to where they don't reset it, or writing their passwords on a notepad, or saving their passwords in a browser, or using the same password across every single site. Um, a lot of those things, giving their passwords to other people.
Yeah. Well, now that comes up with the other problem is, all right, so I have a different password for every website and every different thing I use. That way, if, one of those sites is compromised or something, it doesn't compromise, other places because I'm not using the same password. But how in the world am I supposed to remember all these passwords? What do you do?
Well, I don't remember any of my passwords, to be honest. Maybe one of them.
What?
They're all ridiculous 16-character passwords, and I have to admit that that's because we did a security test here at Terrapin, and I think I was like on the bottom of it on my password complexity, so I thought I must do a better job at this. And I reset every password on every site to be a randomly generated one. But I use a password management program called 1Password for my
Hmm.
personal passwords. As far as a company, we have our own specific IT management software. But for all of my own passwords, I use 1Password. I've also helped, a couple companies set up 1Password for business, where they have their business passwords managed in it, and then they
Hmm.
have their employee account passwords underneath that each employee uses.
Good. So having something in place to help manage that makes a lot of sense. Now, when working with passwords, the other thing that comes into play, because I know a lot of our clients have Microsoft 365. Now, in the beginning, Microsoft did not require us to have two-factor authentication enabled for those accounts, but that's recently changed. That's now forced upon as default moving forward. What, how does two-factor authentication help? Because honestly, it is a little bit of a pain where a pill can't reach, and having to do passwords and then whip out your mobile phone and answer these different questions. How does that multi-factor authentication help? And in what areas have you seen it to have the most impact?
Yeah, so I mean, multi-factor authentication, some people call it two-factor authentication. And the reason it's called two-factor is because you need two different pieces. I mean, I think there is even three-factor authentication, but
Hmm.
just to keep it this easy, let's say two-factor, you need your password and you need another device. You need two different things to get in. So if a hacker gets your password, they still need that second device to be able to fully get in. So multi-factor authentication, I tell the people that I work with, on any external service accessible from the web, whether that's your remote servers, whether that's software as a service application, I think any software accessible from the internet or system accessible from the internet should have multi-factor authentication turned on.
Agreed. And this kind of falls into, both work and play. If you have any type of service, obviously your banks are probably going to have this first and foremost, but anything that offers that type of two-factor or multi-factor authentication, we highly recommend turning it on because, as Misty said, if someone does happen to get your password, maybe because of some type of breach or hack somewhere else, they got your username and password, they're not going to have that second form of authentication and to be able to get into your account. So it really does up the security to prevent, as best you can, those types of threats. Now, the other item I had listed here is more kind of my area than Misty's, but I'll welcome any type of interjection that Misty wants to put in here, is dealing with metadata. Now, normally, there are two different types of metadata. I don't want it all to fall on the bad light here. There are good forms and bad forms of metadata. Good forms of metadata help you to do types of searching and to find things, categorize, sort, and filter things and whatnot. But there are bad types of metadata. The bad types of metadata is when is information about a file that you are sharing with someone else and you didn't know it was there. And not only did you not know it was there, you didn't know what it contained. And so you could inadvertently share track changes, how long something was worked on, where it was stored on your network, what template it came from, all kinds of things that if you knew were there, you would have stopped your tracks and removed it. Why do we put this under security and in cybersecurity? Because sharing that information could be listed as a security compromise, and thus it is a threat. So always be cautious of, if you're reusing a document, maybe you have a contract, an agreement, a letter, and it is one where you went to a client, you made a copy of it, you saved it as a new name, you retyped, reworded some things, and you sent it on. Was track changes turned on? Did it have any hidden fields or comments? Did it have anything else that was embedded in it that was pointing back to something old that you had before? Those are all types of things. And this could be a Word document. They're probably the ones that are talked about the most and can contain the most amount of information. But PDFs as well can contain track changes. Did you know that? Comments, hidden comments and fields and links to other things. Excel documents and so forth. So be aware of those things. There are very simple tools. They're like third-party tools that you can purchase. They are not very, very expensive. Typically, they're on a subscription basis. That's almost how all software goes nowadays. To analyze, show you what's there, so you can make an informed decision of, yeah, it's okay, or no, I don't want that. I need to clean it, and it'll give you an option to do that. A lot of them will built into Microsoft Outlook to provide that level of protection. The other one was e-signatures. Now, this is an interesting one. I was recently working with a client on this because the way it worked is they weren't using a service like DocuSign or Right Signature or True Signature. What they were doing is they had a PDF document and they had signatures of different people, and they were inserting these signatures into the document, and then they were printing it to a PDF. And their thought was, I'll assemble this and then I'll print it to a PDF. And when I print it to a PDF, that's going to flatten it. In their mind, flattening it meant that you couldn't remove anything out of it, and then it was secure. Well, upon further analysis, when we looked at that PDF, I was able to take Adobe Acrobat and we could click on that signature and I could copy it, and then I could go paste it in a Word document, or I could move it around in that PDF just by using Adobe Acrobat Professional. That was not the intended result. They did not want that to happen. So being aware of e-signatures and what program you're using and how you can protect things. Obviously anything can be copied with a camera on your phone, but you don't want to make it that easy. So how do you secure a PDF? How do you flatten a PDF properly? If you're using e-signature program, is it audited? Is it flattening it so those things cannot be pulled out? Is it adding an electronic certificate to the e-signature PDF document so that you know if it's been altered or changed in some way? These are things you want to pay attention to, because if not, that could introduce some type of threat, vulnerability, or use of your information in a way that was not intended. Now, our last one that we wanted to talk about was public Wi-Fis and VPNs. Hey, I'm going to go to Starbucks. I'm going to be at the airport. I need to get on the internet. They have free Wi-Fi at the airport or at Starbucks. These are known places where you can get on the internet. Misty, any vulnerabilities to using the public free Wi-Fi at the airport or at Starbucks or, the car
Yeah, it's
wash? I don't
it's
know.
definitely not advised. I mean, it can be, depending on the way it's set up, it can secure each device, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe you can scan and see all the other devices and it's not secure. I always like to err on the side of it's not secure. I use my
Mhm.
own phone hotspot when I'm traveling, or if you can't require your users to do that, you can set up a VPN connection if you don't have one at your company and have them tunnel all data back to the office. It's just a setting in the VPN where when they connect to the VPN, they can then work securely on that public Wi-Fi. But I find it better just to connect to my phone hotspot and work that way and just avoid the public Wi-Fi altogether.
Good advice. And just to give everyone a little idea of why you have to be careful with this, a lot of times you will find people that will set up these little what are called pineapple Wi-Fi spots that are made to look very, very similar to the official public Wi-Fi in certain locations, like an airport or a Starbucks or other retail locations. You'll connect to it. It'll appear to be taking you to the internet, which it will be, but it will be siphoning off everything you do and analyzing all your keystrokes and everything over to the whole thing. So this is going to do is provide ways for them to garner information about your passwords, uh, uh, everything about your browsing history and so forth is all going to be in one place for them to be able to capture and reuse, and you never even knew the risk was there. So those are the things we wanted to talk about and things that we have seen and getting kind of real life experience from Misty. Misty, I appreciate you sharing that with us. I put together just a few little everyday tips for you here for you to keep in mind when talking about security. Obviously, we do make this a topic that we talk about multiple times in our webinars throughout the year. So we wanted to provide you just a little reminder list that you can keep in mind. As always, if you have any questions, we welcome anybody to please reach out to us and let us know what your questions are, how we can help you to be more secure. And that way we can make technology an afterthought as well as the security of them so that you can concentrate in your work. Misty, thank you for joining us today and sharing your expertise. I really appreciate spending time with you.